here in the United States have been told and taught that that the war in Ukraine was completely Russia's fault, that it's a land grab, that President Putin is bloodthirsty, that he's trying to put the Soviet Union back together, that Ukraine, when any suggestion that Ukraine did anything to provoke it is wrong, and it's pro-Russia, and it's unfair to the Ukrainians. The Ukrainians are innocent victims in all this. Zelensky is a noble person. What do you say to them?
I'm sorry.
You know that's the mainstream view here.
I know what the mainstream view. Yeah, it's just terrible. Problem is, I just gave you an example. The uniting of Germany, the fall of the Berlin Wall, was the agreement from the Soviet Union and Russia. Let the soldiers out. The Americans didn't leave Germany. They still have their military bases in Western Germany. Nobody talking about that. Russia, the Soviet Union left 400,000 army, left Germany and united it. And the agreement was not to have NATO move eastward. The NATO continued to move eastward for the last 30 years. And Ukraine, after its coup in 2013-14, I was in the government. I was the advisor to the first deputy prime minister of Ukraine, overseeing Ukraine intel and military and law enforcement. I remember those days when the head of the CIA came to Ukraine and gave an order to basically destroy Donbass, to shell Donbass with artillery. People in Donbass did not have an army. People in Donbass were, they were supported from different groups, but they did not have an army, didn't have artillery, didn't have aviation, but they were shelled by the Kiev regime for more than 8 years, and more than 15,000 civilians were killed during that period of time. And nobody talked about that at all. So Ukraine moved against its own people. Ukraine started this war, the Kiev government, not the Ukrainians, but the Kiev government. And then in that 10 years time frame, since 2014 until today, they were building propaganda to hate Russia within Ukraine, to hate anything Russian, anything Soviet, that Ukraine didn't have any connection to the Soviet Union at all, even though our history is a 70-year history within the Soviet Union, and Ukrainians, we were part of the Soviet Union for 70 years. And before that, we were part of the Russian Empire for more than 400 years. And before that, the Kiev Rus, Russia and Ukraine came, basically today's Russia and Ukraine came from the Kiev Rus thousands of years ago, and we had our own church, which is also being destroyed today by the West. Right. So who's destroying what today? The West is destroying Ukraine and moving Ukraine to fight. If they wanted Ukraine, if they were loving Ukraine so much in the West, they would stop this war, understanding that Ukraine could not win a nuclear nation like Russia. They wanted to topple the regime in Russia. We were talking about Carter and Reagan before this. During Reagan time, Brzezinski wrote an article for Reagan talking about how to destroy Russia from within. Two Slavic countries fighting, spilling blood between each other, they thought would topple Russia and destroy it into 50 pieces. That's what their plan was with this war. They wanted to topple the government in Russia at the beginning of this war, and that's why this war even started, because that's what the agenda was in Washington, to take the Russian resources and the Ukrainian resources. $75 trillion of resources.
And that's why the Donbass has been attacked for the last 10 years, right?
Yes, it was. That's what they gave away. The Obama administration, I was there when they said, we don't care about Crimea. That's why there was no blood spilled in Crimea. The people went out in Crimea and also didn't want to be with the illegitimate Kiev government. And they said the word in the referendum, and they went away peacefully. There was no blood spill. But for Donbass, the head of the CIA, Brennan, and I gave an article to Aaron Mate, which this year, which I'm quoted in, and he talks about this in depth, how the director of CIA, Brennan, came to Ukraine, and 3 days before the anti-terrorist operation in Donbass, he gave an order to shell Donbass and not give it away to the Russians. That's what was Washington's fighting for, resources, and that's why today we see the outcome from Washington and the new administration to take over Greenland, Canada, because that's where the future resource. It's funny today, but we may see the world change in the next 10, 15 years. America is fighting for resources around the globe today because $75 trillion worth of resources in Russia, more than $10 trillion worth of resources in Eastern Ukraine, and they need that. But if they cannot have it, they need something else, because dollar is on the brink of bankruptcy.